A few days ago, I uploaded a reaction video to the trailer for Season 2 of Amazon's Fallout show. While many of the things discussed in that video will be discussed here as well, I'm making this for the people who prefer a more structured and scripted video, as opposed to the reaction style video. With that out of the way, let's get to it. Starting off on a positive note, as most of this will be negative, I do really like how the Securitrons look, and generally how the Lucky 38 looks. They do look very accurate to the game, and that is something I do truly appreciate. The dinosaur in Novak looks good, even if there is other problems with it I'll talk about in a bit, and what little we see of the deathclaw looks fine. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of good to say, and it's all downhill from here. I'll be tackling the rest of this in two parts. The first part will be covering the dialogue portion of the trailer. Once that's done, I'll go back and cover the visuals for the last part of this video.
Why would my dad go to Las Vegas?
You want to know why the world ended? It started here, with one man.
The obvious implication here is that he's referring to House. He's the only established character that makes sense, and he's the only character that has strong enough of a connection to Vegas for this line to make sense. Now the writers could be doing something subversive here, that he's actually referring to a super secret big bad that we've never heard of, who has a super duper secret base somewhere in the Mojave, but that would be contrived to the point of absurdity, which means it's actually a strong possibility for what they'll do. It could go either way, but I fully expect them to double down on what they did with House in Season 1, where he was on board with nuking the world.
I think you are actually quite a violent man. You just don't want to kill me yet.
I'm sorry, but this is not House. Genuinely no disrespect towards the actor, but I don't think he's a good pick for House. You need someone with gravitas, someone who commands the room, and this is just not that. House also doesn't talk or act like this. He doesn't play games, he's very pragmatic, and he wouldn't be playing coy like this. One of the latest copes is that he might have changed after 200 years, but this essentially acts as a free pass to turn him into anything in the pre-war era. They could write him to be a goofy goober clown, and you'd have people defending it because, well, when you see him in New Vegas, that's 200 years later. He could have changed. It's just a really weak argument and a lame attempt to explain away why a solidly established character is acting inconsistently in terms of his beliefs, goals, and personality.
Like yourself, I am the very best. But what I do, and what I do, is I know everything.
Again, this is just not House. He would never be so foolish as to think he knows everything. In fact, in-game, you learn that he makes calculations as to what he has good reason to believe will happen, based on the state of the world. But he would never claim to know everything, and he certainly wouldn't brag about it. In fact, he'd almost certainly consider the claim of knowing everything to be foolish itself, because thinking you know everything can easily lead to your own downfall, and he'd certainly want to be accurate with what he does know and what he doesn't, because if he's at least aware of his blind spots, he can do something about them. If anything, he'd mock someone who would make such a claim as to know everything. Moreover, even if he did know everything, he likely wouldn't tell anyone, because you wouldn't want people knowing that you know things you shouldn't. As for bragging about it, that's just not in his character. Yes, he'll talk about how great Vegas itself is, but that's because it's so unique within the world and because it's a key component of his plans for the future. You could say that maybe he was a bit more arrogant before the bombs dropped and he might have been humbled by his miscalculation, but this is something that would have to be more subtle and executed well. Portraying him as over the top would be a problem, because he wasn't known for being particularly arrogant. To portray him as some kind of arrogant playboy conflicts with the lore we know about him. He was a genius tech guy who was seen as eccentric. He wasn't known as a blowhard or a bad guy. He has an ego, sure, but he wasn't a self-aggrandizing know-it-all.
I'm looking for someone.
Common story around here.
Someone you care about or
Someone you hate.
Oh, what a great question. What say you, Miss McClain?
This part actually comes before the House part. I just figured it would be better to cover it in this order. My problem with this is that the question itself is kind of nonsense, at least as presented in this trailer. The question exists not because it makes sense to ask, but because the writers are shit and had no better way of making Lucy consider how she feels about her father at this point.
Oh, what a great question. What say you, Miss McLean?
This is so on the nose, it's fucking embarrassing. The problem with this is in the fact that you can be looking for someone for more reasons than caring about them or hating them. What if you're searching for someone who you don't know, but has information you need? What if you're a hitman who has no feelings one way or the other towards your target? What if you're a courier delivering a package? Framing it as whether you care about or hate the person you're after only makes sense so far as making Lucy think about the question because it's directly relevant to her. But it doesn't make sense for a random wastelander to ask a random traveler. I'm just reminded of a moment in The Last Jedi where someone asks Finn and Rose Tico how they met, and Finn says it was luck, only to be asked if it was good luck, to which Rose says she doesn't know yet. The problem being that it makes no sense to ask if it was good luck, because that's implied by the original answer of it being luck. The question makes no sense, but exists to establish that she's still unsure of Finn. It's much the same situation here, where the question being asked makes no sense to ask, and is done purely because of its direct relevance to our main character. There's not much dialogue for the rest of the trailer, but there is this line for the stinger with the deathclaw at the end.
I defer to you about what to do in this situation.
I pray for the day when the shit-ass lame Marvel humor dies. It's not funny. It's also an example of the world being sacrificed for a joke. Deathclaw wouldn't sit there idle waiting for you to drop your funny quippy line, it would be gutting them in seconds. It just undermines the Deathclaw as a significant threat if it's just not going to do anything while you're wasting time talking and saying unnecessary bullshit. That's pretty much it for the dialogue section though. Let's rewind and talk about the visuals. I'm not going to go over every frame, just everything that stands out as being significant to me. The first thing of note is this shot of Lucy and the ghoul heading towards the city. Now apparently the entire surrounding area around the strip materialized out of thin air since the end of Season 1. I guess it was just a render distance issue like in the game. That's not important though. What is important is two problems with this shot. First of all, there's this gigantic fissure in the earth that's just there now and didn't exist before. This massive obstacle is literally game-changing, because it would affect how different military forces are able to go after the strip. Having to go around would cost precious time and resources for an army, and potentially expose them to enemy fire. A fissure like this is a massive tactical benefit to any force defending Vegas from an invading army, at least from this direction. The other problem is in the fact that Lucy and the ghoul are coming from California, and yet they appear to be coming from the east. With the Lucky 38 on the north side of the strip, coming from the west would place it on the left from your point of view, and here it is on the right. This isn't the biggest issue in the world, but it's worth pointing out due to the simple lack of attention to detail. More and more I find covering modern Fallout to be like trying to piece a crime scene together to build a case. It was Todd Howard in the lounge with the candlestick! I mean, it's valuable to build a mountain of evidence as proof as to how and why things have been getting worse and worse with each release. Lucy and the ghoul approaching from the complete opposite direction could be written off as a production goof in isolation. When stacked up with everything else, it's another nail in the coffin that the people making this show don't give a shit, that they can get something so basic wrong. And this is truly a sign of things to come, because there's worse instances of this in this trailer. On that note, there's another instance of weird placement where you could see the tops beside the Gamorra from the Lucky 38 penthouse, but the top should be in the opposite direction from where it's shown here. Similarly, in a prior shot where you see the city from a bird's eye view, you see the Lucky 38 with the Gamorra across from it as it is in-game, but then you see the tops behind the Gamorra when it should be beside it further down the strip. Again, this isn't the biggest issue in the world, but it is a sign of a lack of attention to detail. We then get a shot of Lucy being escorted by members of Caesar's Legion, and we get this shot of an individual wearing a gold laurel crown, as well as the armor that Legate Lanius wore. And I don't know who this is yet, but I don't like the implications this has either way. New Vegas makes a point of repeatedly telling you that the Legion will not survive without Caesar, that a new leader would not be able to control and run it as he could, His most likely successor, Lanius, a brutal warlord who has no actual care for the Legion itself, but has an undying loyalty to Caesar alone, would end up fracturing the Legion through his brutality and lack of being able to handle the political side of running a nation. The reason I say all of this is twofold. Caesar shouldn't be alive this far down the timeline due to his brain tumor, unless the showrunners and Bethesda have decided that the Legion ending is canon and the courier removed Caesar's tumor, and for the fact that if this is Lanius, he'd never show his face, because that's part of his whole propagandized history that gives him the intimidation factor the Legion uses against its enemies. Now, House can't be alive if the Legion won, and we didn't see post-war House in the trailer, so it's possible that they really are going with a Legion victory. I feel like this is the worst choice outside of a Yes Man ending, or alternatively, the showrunners cobbling together a new state of the world that doesn't make sense with any ending. I'm just really concerned with what they're going to do here, and I can't help but feel they're going to fuck it up like everything else they've done with this show so far. I've mentioned how there's a few things out of place in some of these shots, and while they are problems, they're not that big of a deal. This next one is significant, and that's the dinosaur and Novak facing the wrong direction. I know this is going to be seen as a nitpick to some people, but this really does have impact. For some bizarre, inexplicable reason, Dinky the Dino is rotated to face the motel instead of the road, which is world-breaking in two different ways. First up, a place that's supposed to be a small tourist trap pre-war, it makes no sense to face the giant dinosaur away from the highway where people are going to see it, and maybe decide to pull off the highway to check it out. You're not going to see the sign and giant thermometer if it's pointing in the wrong fucking direction. In fact, they got the sign right, but somehow didn't realize how mind-numbingly fucking retarded it is to have the motel sign face in towards the motel and away from the road. If you're already in the motel, you don't need a sign to tell you that you're in the motel. But worse, this dinosaur was used as a sniper's nest to keep an eye out for incoming threats from the east, as well as up and down the road. With the dino flipped around, it turns to east, which is where the fucking Legion was coming from, and therefore the biggest threat to keep an eye on, into a gigantic fucking blind spot for their sniper nests, also making it much more difficult to keep an eye on the highway in both directions. Goofs with the locations of the casino or Lucy and the Ghoul approaching Vegas from the wrong direction can largely be ignored as small mistakes that don't really impact anything. The dino being flipped around like this is absolutely destructive, because the story we were told about this place in New Vegas cannot exist, and makes no sense in this new version of Novak. You can't keep an eye out for Legion attacks if the direction they're coming from is a blind spot you have no solution for in your sniper nest. This basically implies that what we know about this location from the game has been retconned. Both of these things cannot be true. And it still isn't even the last time something like this happens in the trailer. We get a shot of Cooper Howard riding a mechanical bomb instead of a mechanical bull, and I think this is pretty dumb too. Now, people in the comments of the reaction video were quick to point out that there's many aspects of the world that are bomb-themed, like sugar bombs or Blamco mac and cheese. But the problem with that is that those are Bethesda inventions, and those never really sat well with me either. I just never felt the need to comment on items like that before, because there have always been bigger fish to fry when analyzing Bethesda's games. The only nuclear-themed item from the originals was Nuka-Cola, which isn't even necessarily nuclear bomb-themed, and didn't have the bottle with the bomb design until Fallout 4. I think it's really fucking awful world building in a post-nuclear apocalypse setting that so many major aspects of pre-war life were so focused on bombs and nukes by incorporating them into everyday life, by having food brands named after them, and it's yet another aspect that turns this franchise into more of a farce that helps Flanderize it more and more. If you actually try to take the setting seriously, then stuff like this comes across as though it's done in poor taste. But because the nuclear apocalypse is the only thing that matters, I guess that means the entire setting of Fallout just has to be constantly self-referential to the fact that the world got nuked and is now a post-nuclear apocalypse. It's just cartoonish and stupid, and I hate it. I also saw a couple comments saying this is referencing Dr. Strangelove, and sure, that's super neato and all, but being a reference doesn't inherently make it good, nor does it make sense. We get a shot of some gigantic cavern with a building in it. I'm just immediately annoyed. If there's one thing I hate in writing, it's a sudden invention of major groups or locations, or addition to the world or history that doesn't make sense with what's established. A good example is Rings of Power with Galadriel. She is never written to have been a warrior of any kind, but because it wasn't explicitly stated that she did not fight, the writers of Rings of Power took it as a chance to completely rewrite her history to turn her into a warrior who fought frequently. Shit like this is fucking awful and I hate it. I view stuff like this in a similar light. We've explored the Mojave in New Vegas, but now there's this gigantic cavern with a massive building in it, presumably underground, and we're just supposed to believe this was here the whole time. I also just don't see what the point is in having a giant hollow space for your building underground, when you could have just built the whole facility into the ground like the vaults. Also, it's kind of a small thing, but Vault-Tech's giant logo on the side is stupid. If anyone breaks in who shouldn't be here, this will immediately tell them who is in control here. We get a shot where there's 4 Pridwins with one of them crashing, and I have another problem with this. In the span of about 20 years, the Brotherhood has gone from surviving to apparently the dominant force in the wasteland. I had a problem with one absurd massive sky fortress in Fallout 4. I had more of a problem with an article telling us they had 2 of these things prior to Season 1. And now we see they just have 4 of them, just like that. This just tells me they have no restraint. They can't keep things largely grounded, they have to dive headfirst into absurdity. According to in-game lore, the Pridewin weighs 40,000 tons, and they had to steal the power source from Rivet City to power it up. The only time the world or technology in this world advances in any way is for Bethesda to have more cool-looking set pieces and bombastic moments, but never any substance or depth. Never the world rebuilding in any way, to the point they've gone to the west coast and wiped out the civilization that was rebuilding, so they can have their fucking chaotic perpetual wasteland again. There's a quick shot of someone in power armor fighting a Securitron, which heavily implies that the Brotherhood will be fighting House's forces, or whoever controls the Securitrons now, in this season. There's another quick shot of Lucy shooting someone, and on closer inspection, it appears to be members of the King's Gang from New Vegas, and it's a bit hard to tell with the resolution, but they look like ghouls. This is a problem either way. If they aren't ghouls, then why is Lucy killing members of the Kings, a generally well-liked and good faction from New Vegas? If they are ghouls, then how and why did they become ghouls? Are they ferals? The sunken eyes and dark spot where the nose should be really makes me think they're ghouls. Then of course we get a slow motion shot of Lucy shooting her gun, mimicking the opening cutscene from New Vegas where the NCR Ranger shoots a fiend. It's a callback I'd like and respect if the show is actually good and, well, respectful towards the source material. We already know from Season 1 that it isn't though, and based on what we see in this trailer, it doesn't look like it's going to respect New Vegas either. So this just comes across as a cheap member berry, because you know there's going to be people who see this and start swipe hogging at their screens because it looks similar to a thing they've seen before. The last thing to talk about are these shots prior to the Deathclaw attack, as well as during the Deathclaw attack on the strip itself, particularly on the road in between the Lucky 38 and the Gamorra. For some reason, the actual road is gone and it's just dirt now. But more importantly, there's several cars here, which again causes problems with the game. Remember, part of the whole point of the New Vegas Strip was the fact that House had cleaned it up so it would be a unique place in the wasteland like no other, a shining jewel in the wasteland. There were 2 cars on the back end of the strip, away from the main attraction, the casinos. Having a bunch of junk cars here implies that he never cleaned up the strip, and there's no reason to bring them in, especially given the fact that most cars don't work anymore, so doing so would be extremely difficult. The only argument that might work for this is that they were brought in to be used as cover for some big battle, but unless that happens during Season 2 itself, that makes no sense because the windows are intact, and they'd certainly be shot out if they were cover in a firefight. Overall, I'm not impressed with the trailer. It appears that they're doing pretty much exactly what I thought they would, which is mine New Vegas for member berries, while fucking up the lore, world, and characters of New Vegas in every way. There's also the fact that what New Vegas did is just light years away from what Bethesda or the Amazon showrunners are capable of, and they'd never be able to do it any justice. Much like last time, If I'm wrong, I'll have to eat crow on it, but for the most part, I wasn't wrong last time, despite the bot spam telling me my video aged like milk, when I predicted that Season 1 would be awful, and I was right about nearly everything I said in that video. But that's all I've got for today. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. If you didn't like the video, thank you for watching anyways. And either way, check out my other videos, such as my breakdown of Season 1 of the Fallout show, my analysis videos of Fallout 3 and 4, or my breakdown of Saints Row 2022. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.